Today, we will be examining important key terms for the AP test. Now let's examine these key terms, which are author's argument, main idea, thesis, line of reasoning, detailed evidence, and relevance and credibility of evidence. This is author's argument, which is basically the author's stance and views on an issue supported by strong evidence and reasoning.
This quote, "It should be considered equally important to teach the value of lifelong physical activity and healthy eating," represents author's argument because it states the author's stance, which is that physical education should be focused on more and that teachers should provide a few tips to stay healthy.
Some questions to keep in mind when identifying the author's purpose are: how does the author use and organize the evidence to depict the main issue? Do they depict it positively or negatively? How does the author feel about the evidence presented?
Here we have main idea, which is a viewer's stance that the author wants the readers to realize, change, or support.
In the face of growing concerns over obesity and other health issues, school leaders might want to emphasize the importance of physical education classes. This quote represents main idea because it explains the why to the author's argument. The author's argument was that physical education should be emphasized more in school, and the main idea is that this should be done because health issues such as obesity are increasing.
Some questions to keep in mind when identifying the main idea are: what was the purpose of including the evidence they used? What commentary or analysis does the author add to explain the evidence used? Make sure not to confuse the main idea and author's argument. They may be similar, but the focus is different. The author's argument is focused mainly on the feelings and point of view of the author, while the main idea can be seen as something the essay/article contributes to the subject.
Thesis is the sentence usually located at the beginning of an article or essay that directly states the author's stance and views and also creates a structure and reiterates a point for the rest of the essay.
In the face of growing concerns over obesity and other health issues, school leaders might want to emphasize the importance of physical education classes. They could do so through better support of physical education teachers, better resource allocation, and increased involvement of physical education teachers in school curriculum issues. The colored part of this quote represents the thesis because it outlines what was said throughout the essay.
Some questions to keep in mind when identifying the thesis are: where in the beginning of the article or essay is the thesis located? What ideas or arguments do you expect to find in the rest of the article/essay? It might also be helpful to know that the thesis helps structure the author's argument and can directly state the main idea.
Line of reasoning is just the organization of an article or essay that presents an easy-to-understand line of thought to the readers.
The organization or line of reasoning of this article is the introduction with the author's argument, the body paragraphs, and then the conclusion with the main idea and thesis. However, the main idea and the thesis don't always have to be in the conclusion.
Some questions to keep in mind when identifying the line of reasoning are: did the author have a specific way of organizing the article or essay? How does one idea lead to the next? What commentary or analysis connects one idea to the next?
Detailed evidence is evidence and or data that establishes an insight and a great understanding toward the main issue discussed throughout the article or essay.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, obesity has more than doubled in children and quadrupled in adolescents in the past 30 years. This quote represents detailed evidence because statistics are provided.
Some questions to keep in mind when identifying detailed evidence are: what understanding does the evidence contribute to the issue? Does it use statistics or information from a study? Does the evidence help provide context or background knowledge to the issues discussed?
Relevance and credibility of evidence is the use of trustworthy evidence from a valid source such as a government website, an expert on the subject, or a nonprofit organization that supports the main idea and helps the reader develop an understanding.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, obesity has more than doubled in children and quadrupled in adolescents in the past 30 years. This quote represents relevance and credibility of evidence because it is mentioned from where the evidence was found. In this case, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is a credible organization.
Some questions to keep in mind when identifying the relevance and credibility of evidence are: how does the evidence presented impact/add to the argument? What source did the evidence come from? Is the source known to be trustworthy? It's also best to keep in mind that detailed evidence and the relevance and credibility of that evidence come hand in hand.
Suppose you are presented with an article about Oreos and its relations to other snacks. What would you expect the author's argument to be? If you chose C, then you would be correct as both A and B are stating opinions, which would be hard to support. D isn't the correct answer since usually articles will have an author's argument about his or her stance or views about their topic. Building up on the answer from the last question, what do you think the main idea of this article would be? The answer is A, since B and C don't seem to be contributing to the topic about Oreos in relation to other snacks, and D doesn't make any sense.
What would the thesis of this article be? The correct answer for this would be B, since A is just listing a bunch of adjectives and have false facts as Oreos aren't made of cheese, and C is wrong since saying that they're nutritious because they have empty carbs is contradictory. And if you chose D, I would say that any good article or essay will have a thesis as it directly tells the readers the author's views and tells them what to expect for the rest of the essay or article. What would the line of reasoning look like for this article? So, if you chose A, then you are correct. However, if you chose B, then you are also correct. Both of these answers are fine since they provide a clear flow or logic that helps the readers understand the author's argument. C isn't the correct answer since it includes a lot of personal opinions as well as jumping between topics that makes it hard for readers to understand and connect the new information that they're given. D isn't correct since quite obviously no good article or essay will be organized with no body paragraphs that support their argument.
What would detailed evidence look like in this article? The answer to this one would be C, since A and B are both vague, and even though D is very detailed, it's not the best answer, because if you learned anything about evidence from this presentation, it should be that the evidence needs to be both detailed and relevant to the main idea and thesis of the article or essay. What would relevant and credible evidence look like in this article? The answer for this one would be A, since it's both relevant and credible as it states an expert on the subject. B is obviously wrong since Wikipedia isn't a credible source. And both C and D are wrong since they aren't relevant to the topic of Oreos in relation to other snacks.